Hello everyone, this is Math 0028, Section 2.4 U-Tries. Now this section is all about negative exponents, negative and zero exponents. So the main thing you have to remember, you're going to have 5 rules of exponents that you need to know. When you multiply, you have to add. When you divide, you subtract. When you raise a power to another power, you multiply. Negative exponents are going to go to the bottom of a fraction to become positive. If they're negative on the bottom, they go to the top. And anything to the 0 power is 1. So let's get started. On letter A here, we have negative 6x to the 0 power. So that whole expression is to the 0, which just means your answer is 1. Now B is a little bit tricky. What you have to remember there is that 0 only applies to the x. So what you have is negative 6, and then x to the 0 is 1. So you have negative 6 times 1, which is just negative 6. So that one's a little bit tricky. And then C, that whole expression, all that mess in there, negative 5x squared, y cubed, and z, all to the 0 power, is just plain old 1. So just be careful about where the exponent, where the 0 is, and what it's applying to. Now on D, here we have like a whole slide of negative exponents, so just applying the negative exponent rule. 10 to the negative 3, we have to get rid of that negative. So you put the whole base and the exponent on the bottom, but when it goes to the bottom, it becomes positive. So it's going to be 1 over 10 to the third. And then 10 to the third, 10 times 10 times 10 gives you 1,000. So it's 1 over 1,000. On letter E, the negative exponent is on the bottom, so it's got to flip to the top. So that's going to become 8 to the third. Technically it's over 1, but you can just not worry about that. It's just 8 to the third. And then we need to work out 8 times 8. Oops, helps if you have your calculator on. 8 times 8 times 8 gives me 512. So you just use your calculator for that. All right, letter F, x to the negative 5. Remember, it's a negative exponent, so it has to go to the bottom to become positive, 1 over x to the 5th. And on G, the negative exponent is in the denominator, so again, we're going to flip it. It's going to go to the top to become z to the 5th. Now on H, you have to be careful here, not tricky. It is tricky, so you have to be careful. We are going to only mess with the x because that negative 3 only applies to the x. It doesn't have anything to do with the negative 7. So that negative 7, for right now, you're going to keep it on the top, okay, in the numerator, and just the x to the third goes to the bottom. And it becomes positive. That's the whole reason you're flipping it. Now, some of you might ask, well, why aren't you moving the negative 7 to the bottom? Because that's negative also. Here's why. Negative 7 is a coefficient. It's a big number. Say that with me. Big number. So that, we don't have a negative coefficient rule. We only have a negative exponent rule. So the negative 7 stays on top. So let, that crazy voice be in your head on test day, big number. You don't mess with those, okay? The only thing you mess with are the negative exponents. Now look at I. Once again, see, we've got a coefficient of negative 4 on the bottom. That negative 4, the coefficient, the big number, is going to stay where it is. The only thing we're moving is the s to the negative 4 in the denominator. It's going to move to the top. And so easy for me to say, when we move it to the top, it becomes a positive exponent. So you end up with just s to the 4th over negative 4. We can drop the coefficient of 1 in front of the s. And that would be it for those. So it's a lot of stuff to remember with all those exponent rules. Okay, on J, we're looking at division. Okay, remember for division you subtract. So if I subtract 5 minus 8, I'm going to get z to the negative 3. Okay, now I can't leave a negative exponent, so that has to go to the denominator, down to the bottom, to become positive, 1 over z to the third. All right, look at k. If I subtract the x's, I'm going to get x to the negative 2. 5 minus 7 is negative 2. And then on the y's, 9 minus 7 is positive 2. Now here's the really cool thing. When they're side by side like this, anything with a positive exponent is going to stay in the top, in the numerator. Anything with a negative exponent has to move to the bottom to be in the denominator. So the y squared is going to stay on top, and the x squared goes to the bottom to become positive. So you can't leave any negative exponents in your final answer, and you also have to remember to make sure that you move the negative exponents to the bottom to become positive. All right, let's look at L. First of all, we can't do any division with the 12 and the 15, but we can reduce those. 3 is a common factor for those two numbers. And also the other thing you want to do, you've got two negatives there on that fraction. You want to make that a positive. So as far as the fraction goes, you're going to end up with 4/5. Now for right now, I'm just going to write the variables out to the side of this fraction. So when I subtract my x's, 5 minus 2 is x to the third. Okay? Look at the y's. 2 minus 7 is y to the negative 5. And then z squared over z squared, if you subtract those, you get z to the 0. Well, anything to the 0 is 1. But the easiest way to do that is just say anything divided by itself, those just cancel. They're gone. There's no z left at all. If you have a z in your answer, it's wrong, okay? Because they completely cancel each other out. All right, so looking back at what we have so far, we have 4/5, can't do anything else with that, x to the third and y to the negative 5. So like I was just talking about, when you subtract, anything with a positive exponent goes top. Negative exponent goes to the bottom. So we're going to have 4x to the third on top, and then on the bottom 5, and when the y goes to the bottom, remember that 5 becomes positive to get rid of that negative exponent. All right, letter M here. This one is nasty because of the coefficient with the negative 5. You're raising powers to another power, so we're going to multiply our exponents. Make sure you put a 1 in on that negative 5 because that is the hardest part of this whole problem. So what you're going to have is negative 5 to the negative 3 because I'm distributing negative 3 to all the exponents. So 1 times negative 3 gives me negative 3. Now on the x, I'm doing negative 2 times negative 3. That would be positive 6. And on the y, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Now, if you do it like this, then it's so easy to see what goes where. Because you've got three bases here, and on top, look at the exponents. We've got a negative 3, a 6, and a negative 12. Well, anything with a positive exponent staying up top. Anything with a negative has to go to the bottom. So the only thing staying on top is x to the 6. Now on the bottom, and this is where you still need to keep that negative 5 in parentheses, you're going to have negative 5 is going to go to the bottom to make that 3 positive. And the y also goes down to the denominator to make that 12 positive. Okay? Now the last step we need to do is work out negative 5 to the third on the denominator. Okay, so x to the 6 is still on top. Negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 is negative 125, and y to the 12th. And remember that negative 125 stays on the bottom because it's a big number. You don't mess with that negative coefficient, you leave it alone. So that is your final answer. But so many people have a hard time with this one because the negative 5 to the negative 3, some people just go, that's 15. They multiply crazy stuff. Okay, so remember, it's got to go to the bottom. That's where a lot of people have problems. All right, let's look at letter N. Once again, we have an exponent on the outside of a parentheses, so I'm going to put in some exponents of 1 there because I'm going to have to distribute the 2 to all the exponents in that first parentheses. So I'm going to have negative 4 to the second, 1 times 2. X, if I multiply negative 2 times 2, that's negative 4. And on the y, 1 times 2 is 2. All right, and now the second parentheses, there's no exponent on the outside, So I'm just going to bring it down the way it is. Exactly the way it is. Just bring that down. Okay, so before we can do any multiplication here, we need to work out the exponent on the negative 4. So negative 4 squared, that's a positive exponent, is just going to be positive 16. Negative 4 times negative 4. Bring down the variables, x to the negative 4, y squared, and negative 2, x to the negative 3, and y. Okay, so what we have left is multiplication. So the first thing you do is multiply your coefficients. 16 times negative 2 is negative 32. Now remember, when you multiply, you add your exponents. So be careful. We're going to add negative 4 plus negative 3 gives me negative 7. Okay? And on the y's, 2 plus 1 gives me y to the third. Okay, now look at your exponents there. The only one with a negative exponent is the x. So that's the only term that needs to move. Okay, that's the only thing you need to simplify. Negative 32 stays on top with the y to the third, and just the x goes to the bottom, x to the 7th. And that is your answer there. And that is it for 2.4. Have fun with that homework. Woohoo!